Many adults who were vaccinated 20, 30, 40 years ago actually have no protection today. Mothers who have been vaccinated for measles and did not contract measles naturally, they do not transfer long-lasting maternal antibodies to their infants, which protects the infants in the first months of life. And what this means is that our newborns and infants are now at greater risk of measles, and that's true. If you contract measles naturally, that confers lifelong immunity. And so those that were born before 1960 and experienced measles, they have lifelong immunity. But as that population ages and dies off, those under 65 years of age and receive the vaccine, the amount of so-called herd immunity is decreasing over time as opposed to increasing. The increase in measles today is a result of vaccine failure, not a failure to vaccinate.
Hello, hello. We're so glad you joined us for tonight's show. A warm welcome to you. If you're at all concerned about childhood vaccinations, then we invite you to stay tuned for tonight's powerful presentation. The speaker for the next hour is Ted Kuntz, president of Vaccine Choice Canada, and the title of tonight's show is Measles, Pregnancy, and Big Pharma Lies. If you can think of anyone who might be interested in hearing this presentation, be sure to take a moment right now to share the registration link and invite them to tonight's show. It's July 9th, 2025, and this is the Empower Hour. Action for Canada is a national movement reaching out to millions of Canadians and uniting our voices in opposition to the destructive policies tearing at the fabric of our nation. Through call to action campaigns, we educate, equip, mobilize, and empower citizens to take action. We are committed to protecting faith, family, and freedom. Freedom of speech, thought, belief, and the right to life, liberty, and the security of the person is guaranteed in Canada. As Action for Canada continues to courageously defend Canadians' rights and freedoms, we invite you to consider courageously giving, either with a one-time contribution or by becoming a monthly supporter. We want to acknowledge all of you joining us tonight and thank you for your prayers, support, and contributions, all of which helps Action for Canada bring solutions and hope to our nation. If you're joining us for the very first time, it's my pleasure to introduce you to Tanya Gaw, the founder and leader of Action for Canada. Tanya has a powerful focus on faith, family, and freedom, and she and the Action for Canada team are always hard at work, bringing awareness to the many critical issues facing our nation. She's been speaking out for over 10 years now, and her wealth of knowledge has truly been a blessing to citizens all across Canada and beyond. Will you all please help me welcome Tanya Gaw. Hello, Tanya.
Hey, Heather. Hi. Thank you so much. I am really looking forward to this show tonight. This is a critical topic. And so before we bring our friend, Mr. Ted Kuntz, on, I am going to provide a few news headlines that I think are of interest and will set the stage for what we're going to be discussing tonight. And some of it will be also encouraging. I mean, the one thing that has come out of COVID is that there has been an awareness of big pharma. Who was thinking about big pharma 10 years ago? I certainly wasn't. 5 years ago? Nope. But I am now pretty much on a daily basis as loved ones, or we hear stories about people who are being injured, or pregnant women who are having miscarriages, or the increased rate in autism. And so we have finally put 2 and 2 together, and that 4 equals big pharma and a massive political cover-up, and as well that has been supported by the media. So one of the headlines today is that this is just recent from June. It says U.S. to stop funding Global Vaccine Alliance Gavi. The health secretary has announced, and of course that's Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who is really advancing in exposing the harms to children. He is committed to this. He's been vocal for many, many years, and now this is his time to shine, I would say, in the United States. And cutting off the funding to many of these organizations, I think, is key. They have been experimenting on children in third world countries, not only children, but adults as well. And those are some of the things that we may discuss and get into tonight. The Gates Foundation has, they're pouring billions of dollars into Gavi either way, but they have now committed 1.6 billion for the global vaccine effort. Somewhere at some point, we're going to hope that this fellow runs out of money. If not, that he's held to account. I was seeing something in the Netherlands on the streets today where it was outside the courts. Apparently the court was packed inside, and it is a case against Klaus Schwab and Bill Gates, and they are saying that the Nuremberg 2.0 is coming. But this is actually, I wish I had found the link or had saved it at least to report more on that situation as it's unfolding. We are going to pray that justice will prevail. And as you know, Action for Canada is still pursuing justice in the courts. We're going to probably have to face another motion to strike in the fall, but we're going to get through that. We're committed, to do everything that we can to get before the courts and hold the individuals in Canada that have been part of this to account. So pray for us and continue to support that endeavor. All right, another news report was the FDA approves required updated warning in labeling of mRNA COVID-19 vaccines regarding myocarditis and pericarditis following vaccination. So they actually have to, as far as any mRNA COVID vax, it says here, Pfizer, Spikevax, Moderna, they are finally listing that one of the harms is myocarditis and pericarditis. I think that's a massive breakthrough, and I hope to hear more about that. And I'm going to love to hear Ted's view on this announcement. So far, the vaccine companies, they're immune from liability. And that's another thing. I wonder if that ever gets overturned legally, that will they actually produce? Will they actually be bold enough to produce and provide these to the masses? I highly doubt it, because they don't have enough money in the world to cover the amount of vaccine injury that's going on. This was an article from Sherry Tenpenny, Dr. Sherry Tenpenny, who's just amazing. She's always got great Substack information, and there's a new article that's been published in the Lancet. And interestingly, of course, they're scrambling because there is a huge decline, and it even says here, in global vaccination rates in children since 2010. And I know that there's been a huge increase since the beginning of 2020 that they have never recovered from, and they will never recover from. But she did put a warning down at the bottom that they conclude with a call to action, the crucial need for targeted, equitable immunization. And of course, they must address vaccine misinformation and hesitancy. They're focusing on Latin America and the Caribbean. And so she says, let's pay attention to, here it is again, Gavi efforts in those areas. CDC advisors vote to recommend removal of mercury from influenza vaccines. And again, Ted, that's something that I'm going to want to talk a little bit about these metals that have apparently affected, I think, especially children, because the high amounts of shots that they have been forced to take in the vaccine schedules for children. Now, they also say in the article that there's about only 95% of influenza, not only, but 95% of influenza vaccines administered in the US in late 2024 and early 2025 were free of thimerosal. Ted, you're going to help me out with that one too. He's laughing at me. Don't blame him. But it's like, how in the world they knew decades ago that this was causing harm. There's even been leaked videos on this. And just to say, oh yeah, by the way, in 2024 and 2025, we've decided to take this ingredient out. It's like, hello? Okay, so leading into one of the most important areas of the show as well, Dr. Mackey's has reported that oncologist warns of terrifyingly aggressive cancers in children linked to immune suppression by COVID vaccines. And this moves forward to the Western Standard said support for mandatory childhood vaccination rises amid measles outbreak. Of course, we feel that very much so that this measles outbreak was very convenient because of the lack of interest in childhood vaccines. They needed to do something to put fear into the hearts of parents. And what better to do than to suggest that the measles outbreak would lead to massive deaths of children. And so Ted had written an article, and that's kind of what tweaked something for me a couple of weeks ago to say, hey, Ted, you know what? I really feel strongly that you need to come on and talk about this. And he was responding to Corey Morgan, who is a senior Alberta columnist with the Western Standard, as it turns out. And there wasn't any real conversation about the fact that the childhood vaccines are not safe and effective. And then Ted went in to break it down brilliantly in this article, and I'll post this actually in the chat in a moment. But one of the things he says, none of the vaccines on the childhood schedule have been proven safe and effective using the gold standard of testing for pharmaceutical products. Not one vaccine has been tested against a true placebo as a requirement for approval and licensing. The claim of proven safety is marketing propaganda rather than evidence-based. And who of us, who have already raised our children and were convinced by our doctors when they were children that, that we needed to do this to protect them from these horrible infectious diseases. And I look back on even children newborns who are being given a hepatitis B vaccine. I mean, it is so egregious, the crimes against humanity that we are witnessing. And I thank God for this all coming to the forefront, and that natural immunity as God given, as he from birth, God created mankind and he created us with a natural immune system. And that's what we should be relying on. So be sure to visit Vaccine Choice Canada's webpage. We will also be covering pregnancy and vaccination, the new guidelines. The second guideline is a new parent's guide to understanding vaccination. So I am so excited to have Ted on. Heather, would you please come back on and introduce our guest?
Thank you, Tanya. It's always such a pleasure to have our friend, Ted Kuntz, on the Empower Hour. Ted is the president of Vaccine Choice Canada, a not-for-profit society dedicated to protecting informed consent, vaccine education, parental rights in medical decision-making, and medical freedom for all Canadians. Ted is a retired psychotherapist with more than 25 years' experience as a clinician and consultant. He's a father, grandfather, medical choice activist, author, and educator with his own personal story of vaccine injury when his son, Joshua, was neurologically damaged by the DPT injection in 1984. Tonight, we're so grateful Ted can join us to talk about childhood immunizations with a particular focus on the measles vaccine, as well as examining the broader implications of vaccine policies in Canada. Will you all please help me welcome tonight's special guest speaker, Ted Kuntz. Ted, welcome to the Empower Hour. It's so great to have you back on the show again.
Mm-hmm. Heather, thanks for inviting me, and Tanya. It's lovely to be here, and thank you to Action for Canada for all your good work that you're doing. You guys are an inspiration, so God bless you.
Thank you. Thank you, Heather. And Ted, I've been really looking forward to this interview. I think this is a critical conversation. And, we've sort of become fast friends about 5 years ago. And that's just been the way I think of COVID. A lot of people can say that they had a lot of broken relationships in their lives, personally with family and friends and coworkers. But then there's been the positive side of it as well, because Action for Canada has been able to partner with Vaccine Choice Canada and be on the front line of trying to ring the warning bells about what was coming during COVID. And now after the COVID fraud, we have this amazing opportunity to help educate parents and citizens about the further harms of big pharma and how long this has been going on for decades. Now, because so many people have really woken up, I think, even within the last year, and especially regarding the immunizations or vaccines, whatever you want to call these shots for children. There's many that may not know who you are. And I just want to encourage, we've got live on all of our platforms right now. So if anybody is going to want to actually ask Ted questions, you need to sign on to our Zoom, and we've got a Q&A that's available just in case. And so where I think I would like to begin, Ted, for those that don't know your story, Heather alluded to that slightly of having a vaccine-injured son. If you could just give a little of your testimony to set the platform. And through that testimony, I have a question of when through the journey did you become aware, as you started to probably research the vaccines and how your son became vaccine injured? What was that profound moment where you decided, I need to get involved, and then how you became involved with Vaccine Choice Canada?
Well, Tanya, I have to admit, I was like most parents today, is that I knew nothing about vaccines. I absolutely blindly trusted whatever my family doctor suggested was in the best interest of my son. We took Josh to the doctor for his first vaccine shot at 4 months of age. And at that time, this is back in 1984, it was the DPT shot, which is the pertussis, which is whooping cough, tetanus, and diphtheria. And what I often say is that the child that we brought home from the doctor's office was not the same child we took to the doctor's office, that Josh was visibly changed by that experience. We went from having a very happy, content baby that slept well, ate well, was just so beautiful to have. And he became increasingly agitated following that first vaccine shot. And we actually went back to the doctor twice, Tanya, and said, there's something wrong. Our son's not happy. He's not sleeping well. He's not eating well. He's agitated. And we were just dismissed that, we're overreactive parents. It had nothing to do with the vaccine. Because I said, like, this happened immediately following the vaccine shot. And of course, that was completely dismissed as illogical, irrational. Vaccines are safe and effective. Day 21 following that vaccine shot, Josh had his first grand mal seizure. Mm. And it was a seizure of about 25 minutes long. And I actually didn't know what was happening. My son was vibrating on the bed. I was in shock. I didn't know what to make of it. We called an ambulance, took him to the hospital. They said it was likely a seizure. He had stopped seizing by the time we got to the hospital. And they prescribed some anti-seizure medication, and they sent us on our way and said, everything will be fine. Treat your son as a normal child. Well, about a month later, Josh had his second grand mal seizure, again over 20 minutes long. And that was actually more terrifying for me than the first one, because the first one, I didn't really know what was happening. But when that second seizure happened, I knew there was something terribly wrong with my son. Back to hospital. The short story, Tanya, is that Josh's seizures increased in frequency over time. And by the time he was 4, he was seizing 12 to 15 times a day. Hmm. And each seizure was 15 to 20 minutes long. We tried every medication, every known medication, anti-seizure medication, tried to stop the seizures, and we were never successful. And when Josh was 5, the chief neurologist at Vancouver's Children's Hospital took me aside one day and he said, Ted, please do not bring your son back to hospital. And I said, why not? And he said, we can't do anything for your son. We don't know how to treat him. And so there's no point in bringing him. And it was both a devastating message and it was actually a liberating message, because I began to realize that this form of medicine that was available to me through our medical system was not going to make my son better. And that whole journey, when I saw the absolute disregard for the possibility that Josh had been vaccine injured, I took it upon myself, Tanya, to do my own homework then at that point. I was a graduate student at the University of British Columbia, and I had access to the medical library. This is pre-computers. And I began to do research in the journals on the DPT vaccine that my son had gotten. And the evidence was compelling in those journals that the DPT vaccine was actually a very dangerous vaccine, and it was causing exactly what it did to my son, neurological disorders, of which seizures was simply one expression of those neurological disorders. What most may, if you've done some reading on the vaccine issue, you'll know that in 1986, the United States government granted the vaccine manufacturers immunity for liability for injury and death caused by their products. And the vaccine that caused Congress to take that position was the DPT vaccine, because there were so many lawsuits against the vaccine manufacturers. They told Congress that if you don't protect us from these lawsuits, we're going to go out of business, and you might need us in the event of a biological warfare. So that was the catalyst for what I think was the most dangerous day in medical history, not only in America, but in the world.
Wow, Ted, I just sit here and I know our viewers would be in agreement, just astonished, by the testimony. And you are one of thousands, if not millions of others throughout the years that have experienced this. I was listening to a video interview that you and Dr. Maltos had with Dr. Hooker. And he also has a vaccine-injured son who has autism. We know that Rocco has twin boys, and was it at the age of 6? His one son was also vaccine-injured. This has become so prevalent and so common, and it can't be common to the point where it becomes acceptable. And when I had Dr. McCullough on the show a couple of weeks ago, they were talking about opening up a university or college for autistic individuals to get their medical degrees. It may take them a little longer, but we'll get there. And so this is normalizing it. And I just think that what they're doing down in the United States, finally, with the right people at the helm, is calling out the vaccine industry for the harms. And I understand that Robert Kennedy he was promoting a new COVID vaccine a couple of weeks ago, and of course it kind of went viral on social media. It's like, how can he be doing this? I thought he was going to undo it, and it was with the intent. My understanding is, so correct me if you know something different, that they can finally call for trials, official trials, to prove that the so-called vaccines are causing harm. My only concern was, what confidence do we have that they would produce the same mRNA vaccines with the same ingredients as to what we've experienced to get the known results that they are causing injury? Do you have any comment on that?
Well, it's an interesting dance that's happening south of the border with Bobby Kennedy. And I think that Bobby has made some really good moves and has affected some significant changes. And also, I would say, is that it's not happening fast enough for people like me. And so I understand the criticism of Bobby. I have my own. When there was an outbreak of measles in Texas and Bobby Kennedy spoke to that, I actually wrote a Substack article that you could probably find if you look to my Substack, that said, this is how I wish Bobby Kennedy would have responded to that so-called outbreak of measles. And I thought he wasn't clear, and it was an opportunity to share some of the information I'm going to share this evening on your program, Tanya. I think people need to understand is that measles is not the killer that it's being made out to be in the media, and it's actually a very dangerous vaccine. And if people really understood that, they would not vaccinate. And I think Bobby missed an opportunity to educate the public about the measles vaccine. But I think he's under extreme pressure, and he's chipping away at, this beast of the pharmaceutical industry. I also believe that, if he were to make sweeping changes overnight without building the culture where people actually understand and ought to and share the concerns about vaccination, the next secretary that comes in 4 years or whenever is just going to flip the switch and bring it all back again. And so I think part of his challenge is he actually has to change the culture. And that culture has to be chipped away bit by exposing and creating doubt in people's minds about the actual safety and efficacy of all vaccines. And so I think he's moving in that direction. I actually know he's moving in that direction. I just wish we could stop this. To me, it is criminal behavior what's happening. It's not only abuse, child abuse. To me, it's crimes against humanity that's happening. And I believe that if they were to remove the 1986 Act, that most vaccine manufacturers would immediately withdraw their products from the market, because they know that their products are not safe and effective. But again, it's not enough to stop it today, and then 4 years later, the next HHS secretary brings it all back. So we've got a big job ahead of us here.
It's so true. And, I had written, I'm just going to read it for a second, a statement to contact that I have in the United States with direct contact with officials that speak into President Trump's ear. And in a way, I've said, you're like an advisor to advisors because his research is so good. We're talking about not only the vaccines and the harms and the criminal activity there that is just so obvious to anybody that has their eyes open to this, but also the mass immigration and threats of Marxism. So I said, I just don't understand how the left can ignore the Constitution and our laws and advance their evil agenda. And we can't immediately reverse these decisions by enforcing the Constitution and the laws that are currently set out. If we are truly a democracy and Marxism, communism, and Islam in this case are known threats, then wipe them out. Treason is treason, and working with a foreign entity to undermine and destroy us through mass immigration, drugs, foreign woke policies, and political entryism should result in convictions and eradicating the threat. We must not waver in asserting the true and original intent of our founding documents and stop giving credence to the left's psychological warfare and ideological assault against the immutable biblical principles and values that are the foundation of our nations without apology. And I close by saying this feels like self-inflicted slavery, and the government and society can't punch their way out of this wet paper bag. And it's in so many areas of what we're dealing with.
Tanya, I think we're in a very desperate situation. As you know, I'm involved with the National Citizens Inquiry, and we've conducted 3 sets of hearings now, 9 days in total, on the question, are children safe in Canada? And the testimony is heartbreaking. I mean, it's so compelling that we are harming our kids in a dozen different ways or more. And our governments clearly are not interested in the health of our children. We're in we've come to the realization that our governments are very dangerous. I remember when I met Rocco, 5 or 6 years ago, and he said to me, Ted, governments are the most dangerous organizations in the world. And I thought that was an overstatement by Rocco, but I've since learned that he knew exactly the situation. It was me that was being naive. I also believe that we're up against very sophisticated mind control technology here, because good people have bought into the Soji agenda, have bought into critical race theory, have bought into vaccination. That you take one for the team so that somebody else is safe. I mean, it's those of us that haven't been captured by that mind control technology just think this is insanity, and yet. Try having a conversation with somebody who's been bought into the narrative, and you can't move past. You can't have a logical conversation with them.
No, but and it's. I remember when you wrote that article in response to Robert Kennedy and the measles outbreak in Texas. I read it, and again, I was in full agreement with the statement that you'd made, and it was a missed opportunity, and it just makes me frustrated at the fact that we can't miss any opportunity right now to speak the truth and to try our best. The other side definitely didn't have any problem flouting their lies. And so I've always said that because of this attack that we've been under for so long, where they have spouted lies that have eventually become other people's truths. And so we got to repeat the truth often enough until it becomes the truth again. And I think that the position that we've been in, but I think you you and I can agree on a very positive note that since 5 years ago, we are seeing a massive shift. It is definitely present. The reports that I just gave, if, the United Nations and WEF are concerned about the huge decline in parents going out now and getting the vaccine, there certainly hasn't been support for going and getting the COVID boosters. And so we are winning, but it isn't maybe at the speed that we were hoping for. Now, with the work that that Vaccine Choice Canada is doing, I have just been so encouraged by a couple of those guidelines. And one, of course, is to help educate pregnant women. That has been something that has been very near and dear to my heart. I have a grandson that's a year and a half old, and he's completely unvaccinated. Mom is, is not taking any vaccines during pregnancy, but a group of her friends and extended, like she has sisters and extended friends, there was something like between them 10 miscarriages. And nobody really putting it together at first. And of course, that was directly related to these young women having gotten the COVID vaccine. Right. And so you've now got this guideline for mothers. Can you highlight some of the most important aspects of that for women who are pregnant right now and being pressured to take whatever vaccine their doctors are promoting?
You're right, Tanya. We've produced 2 new books in the last 6 months. One is called A New Parent's Guide to Understanding Vaccinations, where we go through the childhood vaccine schedule, and we give information about the disease condition so you understand it, so you understand what it is, what the risk is if you contract it. And then we talk about the vaccine, the risks of the vaccine, what the data says, but also the shortcomings of the entire vaccine paradigm, how terribly flawed it is. And it's not based upon evidence. It's not properly safety tested. And then the second book is called Pregnancy and Vaccination. And the reason we wrote these books is, Vaccine Choice Canada has been around since 1982. So this is, 44 years or 43 years that we've been in this business of informed consent. And much of our work was around supporting families of vaccine-injured children. And a few years ago, we said, we got to get ahead of this harm. We got to reach young parents and young people and pregnant moms before they embark on this vaccine journey and stop the harm from happening in the first place. So that was the goal of these new books that we've developed. The pregnancy one in particular, it wasn't that long ago that pregnancy was considered to be a sacred time. And pregnant moms were, vigilant about what they put into their mouth because they knew that they were feeding for 2. They were feeding for themselves and for their unborn infant. And they were especially cautious of any kinds of medication. And then starting in about 1979, they began to introduce the influenza vaccine. And then they've gradually added more and more vaccines. And so now there are as many as 7 vaccines that a pregnant mother could be encouraged to take. And so one of the chapters of our book it's entitled From Sacred to 7. And we just talk about this steep slide where pregnancy is no longer sacred. And we actually provide directly out of the product information inserts what the manufacturer says about their safety testing. And for all of those vaccines, they very clearly say the safety to the mother and the unborn infant is unknown. And to me, when all you need is to read those words, and that should cause you to stop walking down that path. But unfortunately, again, the psychological warfare that we're under, the fear-mongering, a mother is so in love with that unborn child even before it's born and wants to do everything to keep it safe. And she's being told things to keep it safe that is actually going to create incredible harm and actually end that pregnancy. There's evidence that the COVID vaccine actually is more successful in ending pregnancies than the abortion pill. It's shocking.
Well, I understood this. There is one of the main ingredients was also in the vaccine, I actually referred to them as forced abortions.
Yes.
And, the mothers had no say and no idea about it. I mean, this is Dr. Mengele kind of results that we're experiencing. And so, yeah, Ted, I'm so grateful for these guidelines, and I'm going to hugely encourage parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, whatever you need to do, friends of family members, to get these resources into the hands of young parents and families. And my daughter-in-law, we're expecting my second grandson in August. Will be born soon, and we're anticipating that with so much excitement. But again, the pressure for her to take a vaccine, she looked at them like, "Are you kidding me? Why do I need that? No, I'm not going to do that." But, she's got a mother-in-law that, we can have great conversations together. And so she's learned how to have these conversations with doctors and medical staff about whether vaccinating her son or, herself. So what encouragement would you give these mothers who are experiencing this right now as well?
Well, first of all, they need to take the responsibility for this decision. Don't give it away to a doctor or a pediatrician. No matter how much you like them, what I discovered is that they're actually ignorant of vaccine injury and harm. And so you can't trust them when they say the vaccines are safe and effective. One of the reasons that we've included the product monographs is the vaccine industry was given immunity for liability, financial and legal liability for injury and death caused by their products, but they're not immune from fraud. And so the vaccine product information insert actually is probably the most truthful document you're likely to find, but it's not routinely given. It's very difficult to get, actually. We've encouraged parents to go out and ask their doctor for the insert, and they say, "Oh, yeah, I don't know. I think we throw them all away. We don't actually have any around the office." Go on a website. They don't make it easy for you to read that insert. I'm going to show you a slide later of what one of those inserts looks like. But if you read the insert, and when it clearly says, "We do not know if this product is safe for your infant or for your fetus," and when you look at the safety test, and like they knew before the COVID vaccines were launched that it was killing our babies during pregnancy, and they still license that product for use. I mean, to me, there needs to be criminal charges against those that authorize the use of that dangerous product, because the danger was known. To say that, well, we didn't know is an absolute lie.
And Ted, you're just nailing it right here, because Bonnie Henry is still touting, and David Eby, that this is safe and effective and for people to get their boosters, and that it's safe and effective for pregnant women and children. And I remember in 2021, I was meeting with the RCMP since 2020, trying to bring awareness and say, you need to investigate, you need to stop this, and starting the legal action. And by 2021, I'm sitting across the table from them, giving them a 25-page affidavit on who Bonnie Henry is. And in 2021 as well, we heard about the AstraZeneca vaccine injury to the fellow, I can't remember his name right now, who had, I think, pretty much all of his intestines removed. And we were appealing to the government. I was appealing to the RCMP to stop. Even though Europe and the UK by spring were saying, don't use this AstraZeneca, Bonnie Henry, the emails are out. Yes. And it's being exposed that she knew. And I was working one Friday night late, and it was Bonnie Henry and I think the Nova Scotia health officer who, in the same night, Bonnie Henry started it about promoting the vaccines to children 12 years old and up, and saying you don't need your parents' permission, you can go and do this yourself. And I was on the phone so quickly and actually in tears, knowing that it was going to cause harm, and then the harms to pregnant women. And I still remember like it was yesterday, the feeling that I had, feeling so helpless to get this information out to the public. And now here we are. And I'm going to say it. Sometimes I like to say we weren't wrong, but I'm going to come outright and say we were right. And so now you're providing this information, and that's why it is so important for our viewers that tomorrow we're going to launch this production, and I want to see so many thumbs up to increase our algorithms, but to get this information out now and share it with as many people as possible, because censorship, media censorship, has been a huge part of the campaign to ensure this so-called misinformation that Ted and myself and others have been trying to get out to the public, don't see the light of day. But thank goodness for independent media and podcasts and shows like this. We have been able to help be part of the movement to increase vaccine hesitancy. And I would like to see that at 99.9%, if not 100%.
Absolutely.
So Ted, that was a lot that I put out there. And so I like how you say, don't hand the medical welfare of your children over to your doctor or other medical healthcare practitioners who are willing to put this injection into your child's arm. Demand the inserts, do the research yourself. I didn't have the opportunity to do that, what I feel like was, 32 years ago. And here we are, and we have so many resources available on your webpage. So again, I'm also going to encourage people to look up Vaccine Choice Canada and find this information, share it, gift it, purchase these guidelines and gift it to the people that you know in your life, and help us get this information out so we get to the 100% hesitancy and we shut these people down. Okay, so where would you like to go from here as far as the conversation is concerned? One of my questions is, this is Vaccine Choice Canada's time to shine. As you say, you've been at this since the 1980s. I'm not sure, were you one of the founders of Vaccine Choice Canada? Okay, so when did you come into the picture?
I'm actually a relatively late arrival to Vaccine Choice Canada. I mean, I was involved. I tried to start a group called Parents of Vaccine-Injured Children, in the 80s, but I wasn't aware of Vaccine Choice Canada. And somehow I became introduced to it. They asked me if I would write some articles for them, and I did in around 2012, 2014. And then in 2016, they invited me to join the board. And then in 2019, they asked if I would be the chair or the president.
Okay. Well, thank goodness for that, Ted, and your commitment to getting the truth out and being willing to see through, I think, one of the most difficult eras as far as being criticized for speaking about childhood immunizations or the vaccines. I mean, it has been a turbulent time, but you've weathered the storm. And are you finding that you're having increasingly more support in the work that you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Rocco chides me sometimes, and he says, the best thing that happened to Vaccine Choice Canada was COVID, because before COVID, we were just the fringe of the fringe of the fringe. And now we're a recognized authority. People are looking for information. They're wanting answers. They recognize they're not going to get that from the government. And so it feels like finally, after 43 years, that we're being recognized as the authority that we are on vaccine injury.
In times of financial uncertainty, securing your wealth is more important than ever. With inflation, market instability, and economic challenges, many Canadians are turning to one timeless strategy: precious metals. Gold and silver have historically retained their value, offering a hedge against economic turmoil and a safeguard for your assets. If you're looking to invest, there's good news for members of Action for Canada. We're proud to announce our partnership with Steve Merrill of Sun City Silver. Steve is not only a friend of the Freedom Movement, but he's also offering Action for Canada members exclusive access to some of the best pricing in Canada. Thanks to his extensive client base and affiliation with Silver Gold Bull, you can now secure your precious metals at incredible rates. Silver Gold Bull is a trusted Canadian leader with live pricing available 24/7 and nearly 400,000 five-star reviews on Trustpilot. When you purchase through Steve, you're not only investing in your future, you're also supporting the Freedom Movement, as a percentage of each sale helps support Action for Canada. Plus, there's a bonus. If you place an order of $5,000 or more, you'll receive a 1-ounce pure silver bullet, a unique and valuable addition to your collection. And if you refer someone who places a $5,000 order, you'll get another silver bullet as a thank you. To get started, visit actionforcanada.com/purchasing-precious-metals/. Remember, your decisions are your own, and we recommend doing your own research before making any investment. But with Steve Merrill's guidance and our partnership, you'll be on the right path to securing your future. Secure your assets, protect your future, support the movement. Visit us today to learn more.
And again, what you'll discover is that our medical system does not teach our medical health professionals about vaccine injury. They're told vaccines are safe and effective, end of story. This is the schedule. This is how you inject. And now they teach them how to deal with hesitant parents by shaming them, by threatening them. I mean, it's abhorrent how our medical system has become basically, a drug dealer for the pharmaceutical industry. But yes, this has been an incredibly important time for Vaccine Choice Canada, and it's it warms my heart to receive so many messages from parents who say, "My child is without any vaccine because of you," and what a gift.
And unvaccinated children are thriving, and I can't wait for more of the research and reports to come out. We have the Amish children, for instance, and I know I learned so much from some of the graphs and stats that are out there. Autism, for instance, I think is unheard of within the Amish community,
Right.
and unvaxxed children. And this is very, very exciting stuff, and it's very compelling, but it's a matter of getting that info out there. One of the questions I had is, how do you respond to the argument that vaccines have been responsible for the reduction or elimination of deadly childhood diseases like measles and polio? Polio is a big one. My mom brought it up the other day. Well, when I was a kid, what do you have to say about polio? I went, Mom, actually, it's not all that it seems. So would you let our audience know what the response is to that statement?
Well, what you'll discover is that the marketing arm of the vaccine industry has been, incredible in their ability to market their products, and so they've taken credit for things that they don't deserve. And a case in point is polio. When you actually pull back the covers on polio, and the people that have done that spectacularly is Dr. Suzanne Humphreys in the book Dissolving Illusions. And they look back at those childhood illnesses, and what you'll discover, there are, I mean, it's different for every disease condition, but with polio, what we discovered is that, it came out of nowhere, in industrialized areas of America. It wasn't there before, and all of a sudden, there's this explosion of so-called polio, which was a paralytic condition, and it caused an incredible fear in parents because they didn't know where this was coming from, and the evidence strongly points to it was the use of pesticide poisoning, the arsenic, the lead, the DDT that was being used as a pesticide on our crops. And when you'll see that the incidence of paralytic condition declined when they withdrew the DDT from the market, as well as the arsenic and the lead products that were being used. And at the same time is when they introduced the vaccine. So the vaccine is given the credit for the decline, when I would suggest to you that it's not at all related to the vaccine. And when you look at third world countries like India that continue to use DDT, they have high rates of polio, of paralytic condition. Now, of course, they don't call it polio because polio has been eradicated, but they have this paralytic condition that is epidemic in those areas where they still use DDT. And what DDT is, it causes, that's how it kills the insects, is it paralyzes the neurological system. And so what you realize is there's a lie that's happened here. Mm-hmm. The same thing with measles. What most people don't realize is that measles, the mortality of measles declined 98.5% before the introduction of the vaccine. And when you see the graph, the vaccine contributed nothing to the decline of mortality of measles, and yet it takes the credit for it. And so they have introduced a vaccine at the tail end of a decline of infectious diseases and taken the credit for it. And I'll show you a chart where you see over the last 100 years all kinds of infectious diseases declined, whether they had a vaccine or didn't have a vaccine. Scarlet fever is an example of that. That's been eradicated without any vaccine. So what I would suggest to you is that they did two things. One is they promoted a product at a time and took credit for the decline. The other one is it avoided, I would suggest to you, incredible lawsuits against the pharmaceutical industry, the chemical industry, for producing products like DDT that cause the paralytic condition.
Right. And I know that I remember seeing a graph, I believe it was through Vaccine Choice Canada, and it had shown, was around 1961, where they were introducing the vaccines, and all of these other diseases had declined astronomically because of clean water and good diet, and there had been a massive
sewage systems, but particularly clean water, better nutrition, refrigeration. Yeah. I mean, it's there's been research done that suggests that the decline in infectious diseases in America and Western nations, that around 77% of it is solely attributable to clean water.
And it's just amazing when you can have the facts presented. It makes makes sense. And I know when I was watching your program with Dr. Hooker, he had mentioned that infectious diseases that vaccines were created for can actually be managed by antibiotics. And the other point as well, and I wrote on this years ago, was with Bill Gates when he went into, wasn't it India? And they launched the polio vaccine, and they were always testing on third world countries. But was it 100,000? I'm trying to remember the number, or hundreds of thousands of people children that they had actually paralyzed through their polio vaccine. Yeah. And so where is this being,
Well, again, we're not being told the truth about vaccine safety and efficacy. We're being lied to massively. Mm-hmm. And those lies are right through our medical system, our system of educating doctors, so that they now, continue to pass on the lies. I just interviewed Dr. Paul Thomas this week, who's the Oregon physician, and we'll show some of his research of between his vaccinated and unvaccinated population. And he said to me, "Listen, Ted, I didn't know anything about vaccine injury, and I drank the Kool-Aid like everybody else." And the interview was specifically about the HPV vaccine. He said, when it came out in 2006, they took me to a fancy dinner at a high-end restaurant, wine, food, all those kinds of things. And then they did a presentation on the new HPV vaccine. He said, I bought the story, and I came home and I suggested that my teenage daughter take it. Oh. And he said, now I look back and I am just in a lot of regret about how I didn't do my homework, and I thought I was smart. We're told that as physicians that we're the smartest, people on the planet, so to speak. And he said, I was duped. And it was only after he started to see healthy children in his practice become autistic following a vaccine shot that he finally began to do the research that parents like I did after my child got injured.
Right. And it is stunning. Do you happen to have a guide for doctors where patients could bring them in and start helping to educate?
That's a great idea. Maybe Ted, that should be our next book.
As you were speaking, I'm like, Ted, if you don't have this, I mean, this is absolutely, I would say it was a number one, because I know there's enough Canadians now, thousands and tens of thousands of Canadians who, because Action for Canada, this is what we do. And we mobilize citizens so that they would go out into the communities, whether we're handing, I call them truth bombs, these flyers outside of schools to parents who are starting to understand that SOGI 123 and sexualizing our children children and all of this LGBTQ mass contagion isn't just by chance. You hand in this truth bomb, and that's an opportunity to wake up many parents. And we're getting very good response from that now. 15-minute cities. We would better be out there, promoting that Canadians get this information into the hands. It is vital and critical for them to stand up against their College of Physicians. And we see Dr. Hoff as an example. He made it through. He weathered a little storm. He weathered a little storm and he made it through. And we need more doctors that are informed so that they will also choose to first do no harm. So I would like to now hand the floor over to you and take some time to do your presentation. And I'm looking forward to that part of the show.
Well, Tanya, maybe I'll start off specifically around measles because, our illustrious Premier in British Columbia here, David Eby, came out a couple of weeks ago and delivered a message to say that, the increase in measles, he actually blamed it on political leaders who, in his words, have flirted with the anti-vaccine movement. And he said, I will encourage all British Columbians to ensure they are vaccinated. Measles is no joke. It kills kids. It's a preventable disease. So I'd like to take apart what Premier Eby had to say about measles, if I can. What I say is I don't know who provided the speaking notes for the Premier, but whoever it was hasn't done their homework. And, I decided after I saw Eby's comments, I was going to look up again what the word disinformation means. And I actually think Eby is guilty of disinformation because this is what it says. The definition of disinformation is misleading content deliberately spread to deceive people or to secure economic or political gain and which may cause public harm. And I think Eby's comments are exactly that. They were to secure political gain, and he's causing public harm. There's a number of questions that I think that I just want to walk through as a result of Eby's comments. And probably the first question your audience will be interested in is the question, has measles in fact increased? And the answer is both yes and no. I'll show you a chart of the history of or the amount of measles infection over the last 20 years. And what you realize is we're actually in a low period of measles infection compared to periods of time over the last 20 years where the amount of measles was significantly more. But in general, the answer is yes. And let me tell you why measles is increasing. First of all, maybe I'll give a little bit of history. When the measles vaccine was introduced in 1963, they advertised it, and I don't know if you remember this, Tanya. They said that with one shot, measles would be eradicated by 1967. And clearly, that claim was unfounded. It hasn't been eradicated, and currently, 2 shots are now recommended in order to address measles. What I would say is that while the vaccine has contributed, and it appears that it has, though, again, we're simply making assumptions here as opposed to actually looking at verifiable data, diminishing measles in childhood, it actually has resulted in an increase in measles in adults and infants. And so let me explain why that is. So the reason is that the measles vaccine does not confer lifelong immunity. Its effectiveness wanes over time, and I would suggest to you that many adults who were vaccinated 20, 30, 40 years ago actually have no protection today. The other reason is that mothers who have been vaccinated for measles and did not contract measles naturally, they do not transfer long-lasting maternal antibodies to their infants, which protects the infants in the first months of life. And what this means is that our newborns and infants are now at greater risk of measles, and that's true. If you contract measles naturally, that confers lifelong immunity. And so those that were born before 1960 and experienced measles, they have lifelong immunity. But as that population ages and dies off, those that are under 65 years of age and receive the vaccine, they don't have lifelong immunity and they're more vulnerable, and the amount of so-called herd immunity is decreasing over time as opposed to increasing. And so I would suggest to your audience that the increase in measles today is a result of vaccine failure, not a failure to vaccinate. And I want to say that this was predicted by scientists and researchers before the vaccine was introduced, who understood the limitations of the measles vaccine. But of course, their concerns were ignored. The second thing I want to speak to is David Eby said in his message of June the 25th that measles kills kids. And so is that true? And the answer is no. Measles was once a serious illness, and the mortality of measles, as I said a few minutes ago, declined 98.5% and was no longer considered a public health threat before the vaccine was introduced in 1963. But unfortunately, the government and the media continue to report measles as if it has a high rate of mortality. It does not. You know, they float this infant that died in Ontario apparently from measles, and I want to suggest to you it's very questionable whether that infant died from measles or with measles. What they did acknowledge is that this infant had other serious medical complications that were unrelated to the measles. And I actually think that that's part of the disinformation campaign when they declare that it was from measles when there isn't evidence to substantiate that claim. Back in 2018, Neil Ray, who was an infectious disease specialist, and Dr. Richard Shabazz, who was the former chief medical officer of Ontario, they wrote an article called "Stop the Hysteria Over Measles Outbreak." And what they said is this. They said the borderline hysteria fueled by the media and public health that greets a few cases is unwarranted. At current rates, Canada can expect to see a death from acute measles about once every 100 years. So measles in children is not lethal. What we know is those that have more severe symptoms from measles infection are malnourished. They have particularly low vitamin A levels. That's what we see in third world countries. Measles can be lethal in third world countries where our children are severely malnourished. But the solution would be clean drinking water and nutrition as opposed to a vaccine. Probably the most important question that every parent wants to ask is it better to get the vaccine or is it better to get measles? And Eby implies, as do other media pundits, that if everybody were vaccinated, no one would die or be harmed by measles. And I want to say that that statement is completely false. It actually denies the known risks of measles vaccination, which include disability and death. And so these are the recent statistics. As of May the 30th, 2025, there have been 116,823 reports to the VAERS, which is the Vaccine Adverse Events Reporting System in the United States. And of those 116,823, that included 574 deaths and 2,224 disabilities. Those are, to me, very disturbing numbers. But we also know from a 2010 HHS study that less than 1% of vaccine adverse events are reported. And so what this means is the number of adverse events and deaths could be very well 100 times these numbers that I've just shared. And if that's the case, then we're talking about 57,000 deaths from the measles vaccine and 250,000 disabilities. That's never mentioned by people like David Eby. I've been working with a risk analysis expert who has been looking at the risk of death, the increased risk of death from not being vaccinated for the various disease conditions that our children experience versus the risk of death from the vaccine. And her calculations conclude that the risk of death from the vaccine, from the measles vaccine, is 260 times higher than death from contracting measles. So let me just pause there and say that again. What this data shows is that your child is 260 times more at risk of dying if you take the vaccine than if you don't. That should cause every parent to pause. You know, what we're subjected to, Tanya, is an incredible amount of propaganda that is not based on solid scientific evidence. I've mentioned that none of the vaccines on the childhood schedule have actually been tested against a true placebo. And so the claims of safety testing that the vaccines are proven safe is fraudulent. That's marketing propaganda. That's not evidence-based medicine. What I can also tell you is that the period of actively monitoring for safety of childhood vaccines is shockingly short. I don't know, Tanya, if you have any idea how short that active safety monitoring is for childhood vaccines. Any guesses?
I was just unmuting here, Ted. Give it to us.
Well, it's as short as 48 hours and as long as 4 weeks. That's the period of active monitoring for safety. And if you want to put that into some kind of context, when they introduced Viagra into the market, they tested that product for 10 years before they deemed that it was safe and safe enough to be put on the market. Our vaccines are on for as short as monitored for as short as 48 hours. And as long as 4 weeks. The measles vaccine was monitored for only 42 days, and the safety study, only included 342 children. I don't know how you have confidence in a safety study of that poor quality.
And you know, Ted, one of the things I remember as well is when I first learned about, I believe it was Dr. McCullough who made the comment that normally if there was 50 deaths from a vaccine, it would be pulled immediately from the market, and you would see the commercials or the ads on TV saying, "Hey, if you've been harmed or somebody you know, contact us," because the lawyers were ready to go and sue. Yeah. And so you know this is a targeted attack, and that's why when you say it's criminal, I can't emphasize that enough. They know. Bonnie Henry knew. David Eby was informed. John Horgan, who was our former premier, they were advised. They knew that this was causing death and destruction, and still to this day, David Eby and Bonnie Henry are promoting it. So I'll stop, but we'll go back to your presentation here, and looking forward to seeing some of those charts as well.
Yeah, so just a couple more points, and then I'll pull out the charts. One of the things that's never talked about in our mainstream media or public health officials is what are the benefits of actually contracting measles. And the studies indicate that there's a strong link between naturally acquired measles infection and the reduced risk of Hodgkin's and non-Hodgkin's lymphomas. There's also a study that was actually only released about 2 weeks ago. It's a Japanese study that reveals that natural exposure to measles and mumps and not having an MMR vaccine reduces the risk of heart disease. And they calculated that nearly 200,000 individuals would not die every year if they had contracted measles or mumps instead of taking the vaccine. 200,000 individuals a year. This is the United States. Another observation is that when children experience childhood illnesses like measles, mumps, chickenpox, first of all, it's a way of developing, maturing the immune system. The immune system can't develop unless it's being challenged. You know, it's like you can't put muscles on your body unless you lift a weight, unless you create some kind of challenge to the system. And I would suggest to you that our childhood illnesses are actually divinely inspired, that they're a part of the developmental process of healthy children and a robust immune system. Parents who don't vaccinate their children notice that when they contract illnesses like measles, mumps, and chickenpox, and even the flu, that developmental leaps occur following the recovery from those childhood illnesses. They become, the child seems to very quickly mature almost overnight following recovery from those kinds of childhood illnesses. Dr. Byron Bridle, he testified at the NCI in Kitchener just a few weeks ago in June, and he said if children are not exposed to the microbial world, their immune systems do not develop. And he described children today, he used the term pandemic youth, and he said their immune system has been so compromised and weakened that they're more vulnerable to infections. And then finally, EB made the claim that it's reckless to question vaccine safety. And I would suggest to you that it's reckless not to question vaccine safety. You know, the fundamentals of an ethical medical system is informed consent. And we ought to be, as responsible parents, we need to do our due diligence. We need to understand what the risks are and what the benefits are and make an informed decision. And EB would suggest to you that you shouldn't ask any questions. You should just blindly follow the dictates of our medical cartel. And I think that's what's reckless. Let me just walk through quickly some slides, Tanya, and then we can see where that takes this conversation. So I've titled this slide what David Eby didn't tell you in his June the 25th rant to the media. Let me just speak to informed consent. The second paragraph there I think is important for parents to understand. According to the Canadian Medical Protective Association, for consent to serve as a defense against allegations of either negligence or assault and battery, the consent must have been voluntary, meaning free of coercion or threats of reprisal. Also, the patient must have the capacity to consent, and the patient must have been properly informed on the purported benefits, significant risks, and alternative treatment options. I would suggest to you that informed consent does not exist in Canada or almost all Western nations when it comes to vaccination. I think this is an important slide. This is a quote that was in the public register in the United States in June of 1984. And this was in response to increasing questions about the safety of the polio vaccine. And the Federal Register is a document from the U.S. government that goes out and it dictates policy. And this is what it said in this statement. It said, any possible doubts, whether or not well-founded, about the safety of the vaccine cannot be allowed to exist in view of the need to ensure that the vaccine will continue to be used to the maximum extent consistent with the nation's public health objectives. So if you understand what they're saying here, they're saying, you know what, we can't have any doubts about vaccine safety. We can't even allow that conversation to exist because our goal is to maximally vaccinate the nation's population, and that goal is more important than the safety of the product. I think that's a statement of criminal behavior right there. I've mentioned this briefly before. None of the vaccines on Health Canada's recommended childhood vaccine schedule were tested against a neutral true placebo. Childhood vaccines are actively monitored for safety for only a few days or at most a few weeks before they are licensed for use. And this is an inadequate amount of time to reveal whether vaccines cause autoimmune, neurological, or developmental conditions or other chronic conditions. You can't know that in a few days or a few weeks. This slide shows you the active period of safety monitoring of various vaccines on the childhood schedule. The Hep B, for example, was monitored for 5 days, the DTaP for 8 days, polio for 3 days, pneumococcus for 7 days, meningococcal for 7 days, the MMR 42 days, Hep B 4 days, Hib 3 days, rotavirus 8 days, influenza 4 days. Again, I ask, how could you possibly have confidence in this kind of safety testing with that short length of active monitoring of safety? If you read the vaccine inserts that I mentioned, which I think is probably the clear statement that you'll get from a vaccine manufacturer, it clearly states that vaccines have not been tested for their ability to cause cancer, damage an organism, damage the genetic information within a cell, change the genetic information of an organism, impair fertility, or cause long-term adverse reactions. If you read insert after insert, you'll see the same language over and over and over again. I mentioned that I was going to show you what a vaccine insert looks like. This is the vaccine information insert for the HPV vaccine. Most of the inserts are between 35 and 50 pages long in very fine print. That's why they never give it to somebody who's coming for a vaccine shot. Vaccines are the only product, medical or otherwise, where a manufacturer is not legally responsible for injury and death caused by their products. The result of this legal immunity is that no one is held responsible when injury and deaths occur. A consequence of this legal immunity is that there is no legal or financial incentive for the vaccine industry to make their products safer, even when there is clear evidence that vaccines can be made safer. When a parent reports vaccine injury, they are told, and I was told this when I began to suggest that my son was vaccine injured. It's just a coincidence. This is normal. Your son's seizure disorder would have happened anyways. You have poor genes. You're simply looking for somebody to blame, and it couldn't have been the vaccine. This is the chart I was mentioning that shows the decline of mortality of diseases in America from 1900 to, in this case, 1963. The green line is measles. And what you'll notice here is in 63 is where the vaccine was introduced, but it had already declined 98.5% before the vaccine was introduced. If you look at the timeline for scarlet fever and typhoid, again, it declines on a similar kind of gradient with no vaccine. But again, most people don't see this information. They're told that the vaccine caused the decline in mortality, and it's easy to believe that. Here's a slide that talks about, the state of emergency. This was in Washington, the state of Washington in 2016. They had 44 cases of measles, and they declared it a state of emergency. This chart shows the number of deaths, and in 2016 there were 0 measles deaths, but that caused a state of emergency. But heart disease, cancer, medical errors, car accidents, all of those other things don't qualify for a state of emergency. They talk about, EB said this, that measles has been eradicated. Well, if you look at this chart, again, this is U.S. data, you'll see that the kind of measles outbreaks that we've had in recent years are minimal compared to what we had in 2019 and earlier. So we're being told a lie that the number of measles cases is exploding, and the world is coming to an end. I think this is a very interesting chart because this shows the rate of vaccination in 1985 in the United States. And what it shows is that the measles vaccine only was a 61% rate of vaccination, whereas you've got EB and others saying, oh, we're at 90% and that's not enough. Whereas back in 85, it was 61%, polio was 53%, DPT was 63%, and all of those others were 0 because they hadn't been on the market yet. And yet, those of you that lived in 1985, I don't think you'll recall states of emergency because of our children were unvaccinated with these vaccines. I like this chart because it shows what the rate of harm or fatality is of a disease condition, and the percentage of the population not harmed. So if you look at measles, for example, the rate of harm before the vaccine was 1 in 500,000, and that meant that 99.9998% of the population was not harmed. But we don't look at the amount not harmed, we look at the harm, and even 1 is somehow considered to be an emergency. I'm going to spend a little bit of time here talking about vaccinated versus unvaccinated studies. And first of all, what you need to know is that our governments, the CDC in the United States, Health Canada in Canada, refused to conduct vaccinated versus unvaccinated studies. They claimed that it would be unethical, immoral to withhold a vaccine from a child. I would suggest to you that there already are many children that are completely unvaccinated. All you have to do is invite them to be part of a study, so that that claim of it being unethical is absolutely fraudulent. But in the last number of years, there's been a number of independent researchers that have conducted vaccinated versus unvaccinated studies. This is what's called the Mawson study. And I think the results of this study are staggering. They looked at the health conditions of of children in the United States ages 12 to 18. And the little white child on the left is the rate of disease condition of an unvaccinated person. And then the rest of the ones are vaccinated individuals. And you'll see that the rate of illness is chronic illness is 2.4 times higher in a vaccinated child, eczema 2.9 times, neurodevelopmental disorders 3.7 times more, autism 4.2, ADHD 4.2, learning disabilities 5.2, and allergic rhinitis is 30 times more. To me, graphically, you see that the vaccinated children are clearly less healthy than the unvaccinated. This is the results of the study of Dr. Paul Thomas that I mentioned that I interviewed this past week. He took very seriously the responsibility of informed consent. He wrote a book back in 2016 called The Vaccine Friendly Plan, and it offered suggestions to parents how to reduce the risk of vaccine injury. And that included delaying vaccines, doing one at a time, only doing one vaccine that included aluminum at a time, and refusing some vaccines that absolutely made no sense, like hepatitis B vaccine on the first day of life. And as a result of that, Dr. Thomas had the largest unvaccinated and partially vaccinated pediatric population probably in America. And the medical board of the state of Oregon, where he practiced, came to him and said, what makes you think that your information that you're giving to parents is producing healthier children than the CDC schedule? And he said, well, I'll take you up on that offer. And he took his data to an independent researcher and asked them to look at the state of health of unvaccinated versus vaccinated children. And I'll tell you what the key is to this chart. I suspect you already know that. The blue line are unvaccinated children, and the orange line is vaccinated children. And so what this is the number of or doctor's office visits over a 10-year period. And in every single case, what you'll see is that the health condition of the vaccinated is sicker than the unvaccinated. And you look at one like ADHD, there was no ADHD in the unvaccinated population, and this incredible, disturbing hockey stick chart of ADHD in the vaccinated population. I mean, this by itself should be grounds for criminal charges against the medical industry. What I can tell you is that 2 days after Dr. Paul Thomas released the results of this research, they held an emergency meeting, the Oregon Board of Health, and they removed his license to practice medicine in the state of Oregon. In 2020, there was what's called the control group study, where Joy Gardner took the data of the unvaccinated population in America, the health data, and compared it to the health data of the vaccinated population in America. And she produced these kinds of charts for about 15 or 20 various conditions, health conditions. And I've just produced a couple of them here to give you an idea of the difference between the vaccinated and the unvaccinated. So again, the unvaccinated is the green disc or column, and the vaccinated is the orange. This is autism spectrum disorder. This is ADHD. This is asthma. This is heart disease. Look at that chart there. 0% in the unvaccinated population. 40% of adults have heart disease in the vaccinated population. Again, disturbing. I mentioned that I've been working with a risk analysis expert. She has looked at the risk of death from not being vaccinated and the risk of death of being vaccinated. And these are her results. And we're going to be producing some information on this shortly. But the column to pay attention to is the column on the right here that shows the increased risk of death from vaccination. And what you'll see is that with every single vaccine, your risk of death is higher from vaccination than from not being vaccinated. This is what the vaccine schedule in BC looked like in 2022. If you followed the recommended schedule, 72 doses of 18 different vaccines. This does not include COVID. If you add COVID and you take 1 or 2 a year, as is being encouraged, you could well have over 100 doses of vaccines before age 18 in the province of British Columbia. I want to bring this to your attention because, Tanya, in your work, you're looking at how the nuclear family, the authority, the responsibility of parents are being undermined. This is an example of how it's being undermined with regards to vaccination. This is a website on the internet for teenagers about how they can get vaccinated without parental consent. And if you read it there, it says, there's a lot of misinformation about vaccines online, and sometimes well-meaning parents fall into rabbit holes of conspiracy theories and made-up facts. While they often intend to protect their children, not vaccinating has the opposite effect and leaves kids more vulnerable to dangerous and even deadly diseases. And so it tells you how you can get vaccinated without your parents knowing and keeping it a secret. These are the two guides that you mentioned, Tanya, that we've just developed, the New Parents Guide to Understanding Vaccination, Pregnancy and Vaccination. Both of those are available from our website. I thought I'd share a little bit of humor with you. This one mouse says, are you going to get vaccinated? And the other one says, you're crazy. They haven't finished the human trials yet. And the more you know, the more you know. That's what I've got for you.
Wow. That's a download, Ted, and I really appreciate the information. I'm sitting there, again, absorbing it. I'm sure many viewers are going to be looking at that list of vaccine injury and not realizing why their child may have ADHD, not realizing that that was 100% a vaccine injury. Another thing that Dr. Hooker said when he was on your show, having spoken about his son having autism, and when Dr. McCullough was on recently as well, we were talking about autism, and I said, it's just not the child, it's themselves that are dealing with the autism, it's the whole family. And he had given a rate of an 85% divorce rate in families where they end up having an autistic child because it puts so much pressure on the couple's relationship. And then another thing he said, because his son doesn't have siblings, is they're already considering what happens when they're older and pass away, who will care for their child. It is criminal. It is absolutely 100% criminal. And we're going to hope and pray that one day there is going to be justice, that it will prevail, and that these individuals will be held liable to the fullest extent of the law. And so, my friend, thank you so much for coming on the show. And I'm again going to encourage our viewers to share this information. Education is critical. I always say knowledge is power, and when you have it, you got to use it and you got to share it. And that's this movement between all of us within, I want to call it the freedom movement, but it's expanded to that. This is Canadians, and these are people around the world that need to hear this information. So, Ted, what in closing here, what are some words of encouragement or wisdom to our audience that you would like to extend?
Well, again, there's really good information out there. If you go to our website, there are a ton of books. Like if you look at my bookshelf, I've got probably more than 100 books on vaccination. So the information is out there. It is not what you're being told by your doctor. I would suggest to you that go in acting as the authority when you're having conversations with your doctor. Don't be intimidated by them. What you'll discover is they don't know, and they will use fear as opposed to facts to help to convince you to vaccinate your child. The other thing I would say is never leave your child alone with a doctor. When the birthing happens, you keep all eyes on that infant. Do not allow them to take the infant out of the room without you. I hear stories all the time of them vaccinating children in the next room and then bringing the baby back. We have to recognize that this health industry is not about health. It's a very dangerous industry. It's been captured. It's been corrupted. And through your work, Tanya, and my work, we're trying to reclaim, a civil society that actually supports families, supports health, supports the authority and the responsibility of parents to make medical decisions for their children.
Ted, there has been such an erosion of trust in public health and over these years, and we've got to look at it from the positive aspect that it's been a gift because it's helping us wake up so that we can turn these atrocities around and put an end to them. And I believe that we are going to win this war, but it's not going to happen with people sitting at home or watching this video and merely giving us a thumbs up. You got to get actively involved in sharing the information, at least do your part. Education is huge in winning this battle for the hearts, the minds, and the health of our children. So, my friend, thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to look forward to having you on the show again once you have your new guide ready for health for physicians, and we'll help you promote that. So thank you. God bless you in the work that you're doing.
Well, God bless you. Thanks for this time today. I'm very grateful.
Thank you, Ted. All right. Well, yeah, that is incredible. I was going to announce next week's guest, but that is to be announced. We've had a lot going on with Action for Canada, and I'm going to go now straight to the Bible verses, which I hope will give you some encouragement. I think it's on point with the show tonight. Ephesians 5:15-17 says, "Be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity, because the days are evil. Therefore, do not be foolish, but understand what the Lord's will is." And in this particular topic, we know that we have natural immunity. We know that this has been evil that's been brought upon us, and that, trusting parents have had this, been convinced that this was the right thing to do, but we need to educate ourselves. And now we have that amazing opportunity to do that. So we need to be wise. We shouldn't be foolish, so we can understand what the Lord's will is on this issue about our health and well-being and that of our children. The second verse is from Proverbs 4:7, and it says, "The beginning of wisdom is this, get wisdom. Though it cost all you have, get understanding." And isn't that just something years and years ago? I remember thinking, man, I wish I was a person with better discernment. Have you ever heard, a speaker and just said, they're so wise, they're so discerning, they have this understanding, they have knowledge, it's such a gift. Well, then as I was reading through Proverbs, throughout Proverbs, it says that gaining wisdom and knowledge, gaining understanding is better than jewels. In this day and age, in this era of what we've just gone through, you can see how that really bodes so true. So pray for it. It says, ask it of the Lord. Ask for wisdom, knowledge, understanding, and discernment. And I always ask of the heavenly kind, not the earthly kind. You don't want an earthly knowledge. You don't want earthly understanding, because that's made up of man. And look at what a mess we've gotten into because of it. So always pray for heavenly wisdom, knowledge, understanding, discernment, and even pray for patience. Because if we don't, we'll just kind of go crazy thinking all of this should be over by now. But it is a journey. So thank you for sharing this journey with us. I'm going to look forward to seeing you next week. God bless you, and God bless Canada.
Sacrificing so much for vaccination. We are going to be in every town and every city, and we are going to build communities within these communities of like-minded people who are actually going to care for one another again and love on each other and give each other the help when they're down. We are going to use the teams and the people that build within chapters to support our businesses. The government's actions are completely 100% unlawful. Judgment will again be found on justice, and those with virtuous hearts will pursue it. You have a virtuous heart if you are here today pursuing freedom and righteousness. And then verse 23 comes along with a promise. God says He will turn the sins of evil people back on them. He will destroy them for their sins. I take great comfort in that because I serve a mighty living God who has allowed us to go through this season of discomfort because we as a nation had turned our backs on Him and we need to get right. So I am just going to thank you so much. I'm going to say God bless you and God bless Canada.